So we're here at the Book Rack in Arlington. Around you have a lot of cafes and places to eat. There's also a movie theater that's like right over there. So there's a lot to do in the area.
And we're about to look in and show around. So we're here at the Book Rack.
Hi, I'm Mike Bulio, the owner of the Book Rack. I've owned it for about 20 years and worked here for kind of 40, at least in some capacity.
And we're just going to ask some questions about the store and books in general.
So Mike, what inspired you to open a bookstore specifically?
So my mother started working here when I was 5, when I went to kindergarten. And she started managing it in the 80s. And then, so I've always worked here since I was basically 5. And then she passed in '02 and I took over because the Book Rack's been a part of my life since basically I was born, and I just couldn't imagine life without it. And here we are in 2023, and business has never been better and things are going great.
So tell us more about the evolution of the Book Rack since when you were little.
So it's changed a lot. So we used to be in a much smaller location in Lexington, and I frequently joke that what built the Book Rack was Bodice Ripper romance novels. Like historical romance novels were really big in the 70s and 80s, and there were a lot of people that, you know, they were reading, you know, they would read a book a day, and, you know, they would come in with 2 grocery bags of books and walk out with 2 different grocery bags of books. Mm-hmm. And back then there was you could trade in your books and it was 1 for 1, and it was a different thing that was much more casual. And then over the years we started to add in new books, so we have, you know, all your normal bestsellers and used books, and we've evolved quite a bit, and we sell a lot more sort of literary fiction, a lot more science fiction, a lot more mystery novels, and so that's changed a little bit, and just the number of new books that we sell and the number of kids books that we sell too. Like when I was a kid here, when I was 5, there was, you know, like 1 shelf this wide of kids books, and now we have a whole section, and it's a huge part of our business.
Why do you think it's important to buy used books specifically?
You know, it's funny because the Book Rack's been in my life my whole life. I joke that I can't relate to my customers because I've never really had to buy books, but it's amazing to be able to recycle them, to have them find a second life, and it's a great way to save money too. But it's also nice to know that they're going to a good home. And people frequently are like, will say, "Oh, I gave my books to the library for their book sale," or "Oh, I passed on my books to a friend so I didn't trade books." And I'm like, you know, really what we love is for the books to find a new home and to be loved by someone else. So, you know, we facilitate that here at the store, but if it's happening elsewhere, that's good too.
We read that there's a huge sense of community here, and we were wondering how you have built that sense of community.
Dumb luck. No, no, honestly, it's true. I mean, we've been incredibly lucky. We moved to this location in '99, and Arlington is really very local focused, and we've been really lucky in that the community's really rallied around that. And I mean, the good news is because we have a huge kids section, it's a very family-oriented town. At least in the past 20 years, you know, we do get them young. So, you know, we get these new families coming in, and their kids have grown up coming here, and that's really helped to have us become a kind of a fixture.
How do you make books affordable, and why do you think that's important for a community?
So it's challenging, especially, I mean, right now the book ecosystem is crazy. If you look at the prices on new books, I mean, it's true with everything sort of post-pandemic, but like the prices are going up and up and up. And it's hard. I mean, someone was in here just recently who's been buying mystery novels for a lot, you know, since the 70s. And, you know, they used to be cheap little pulpy paperbacks for 50 cents. and now they're reprinting some of those books for $18. So because we do the used books, we do have an element of a thrift element so that you can save some money. It's important. I mean, we're also really lucky because we live in an area with one of the best library systems in the country and probably the world. And so there are a lot of options, but being able to get books in people's hands and to sort of encourage reading is really important. And I'm happy that we're able to do a lot of that.
So how do you think the rise of technology has affected bookstores and reading in general?
It's interesting. I remember when the Kindle was new, and people were like, oh, well, that's it for bookstores. And I mean, to some degree, I'm always like, oh, when is the other shoe going to drop? Like, when are people just going to be completely screen focused? And there's been a real pushback. I do feel like, there's room in the world for e-readers. Especially like if you're traveling or things like that, and sometimes you really can fit a whole bunch of books on a little e-reader, which is nice. But thankfully, even now, people your age, my son too, like they're just used to holding a paper book and flipping the pages, and that hasn't gone away as fast as everyone predicted it would. The nice thing is it's a lot easier to search for books that you want. So the technology's helped in that way. Like, if you're missing a quote, you remember a quote, like, what was that quote from? That book changed my life, or that quote changed my life, but what book was it in? Mm-hmm. Like, that kind of stuff is so much easier to find. Or like backlist for an author, is so much easier to search for. So that piece of it is nice too.
What would you say is the ultimate goal for the book rack?
So I have a funny joke about that, which is that there was so the American Booksellers Association is the sort of group of independent booksellers around the country, and they had a campaign a few years ago that said, buy books from your local bookseller, not someone who wants to colonize the moon, referencing a certain conglomerate owner. But I've always joked that, like, I too want to colonize the moon. Like, wait a minute, I'm both. But honestly, the ultimate goal is to just, I guess, have fun selling books. I don't know. I don't know. I just, wait, shoot. Now that my joke is out, I'm like, I don't really have a real answer to that question. But I should as a business owner.
No, that's fair though. Like, I think that's a good goal.
Thank you.
Why do you think it's important for people to keep the experience of going to bookstores and reading physical books alive in a time where it's so easy to get anything at the touch of your fingertips?
So I frequently say to people that my biggest challenge as a local business or a bookstore is not is getting people out of the house, like get them to come in. And we talked about the sense of community earlier. Like I love it when people inadvertently run into someone they know here at the book rack. And sometimes it's two regulars that run into each other and it's just kind of common. But every once in a while we'll see people that haven't seen each other for a couple years, like, oh, our kids went to karate together or whatever, so great to see you. And I just love that. But that's that sort of thing. And it doesn't have to be here. It can be at Starbucks or Cafe Nero or Kickstand Cafe. Or anywhere, but just, getting out of the house. And again, like, not to keep referencing the pandemic, but, especially after that, people are really just seeing other people is exciting. It'll get boring again soon, but right now it's still exciting and fresh.
So as a book lover, what genres do you most enjoy reading?
So sci-fi is kind of my comfort food. Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir is awesome. If you haven't read it, he wrote The Martian as well. They're both excellent. But fantasy and sci-fi is. But I read a little bit of everything. I mean, frequently, like the hottest bestsellers. Like I just read Lessons in Chemistry, which was delightful, and they're making an Apple TV show about that too. So I frequently will, whatever's a hot seller will read. Mm-hmm. Although there's a few sometimes like the big sellers. I'm like, I just am not interested in this at all. I don't understand how this is the biggest book in the country right now.
Yeah. So what do you think is needed to create a comfortable atmosphere in a bookstore?
I am incredibly lucky with really dedicated and great staff that have been here for a long time. And you just couldn't ask for a friendlier bunch of people. And that really, I just feel like when people come here, they do feel like friends, family, whatever but like, I really have stressed over the years, and they do it anyways, but just welcoming people when they come in, offering to help find stuff or, whatever, but just making it feel like, we recognize you and we're happy to see you and we want to help you find something if you can't find it yourself, or leave you alone if you want to be left alone.
Yeah.
What characteristics do you think a person needs to be a successful bookstore owner?
I don't have any of them. So I don't know. I think, you'd think the answer is reading a lot of books, which helps, and you'd also think being organized would help, but I'm definitely not organized. And I am, once again, blessed with employees who are really compulsive about like shelving and organizing stuff, which really helps. And I guess with any business, the key to success is knowing your weaknesses and finding employees that are good at the things you're not good at. And so that's helpful. And I often think that like it would be tricky to start from scratch, like, because the store was my mother's before mine. Like it is a little tricky to imagine starting from scratch. But because, honestly, to some degree, capital is a big factor there too.
Yeah.
What has been the ultimate key to your success?
I think, community support is one of the biggest things. Like, I'd like to say that I had some magic spell that I cast that worked. But I think it's kind of been a combination of focusing on things that are important to me, which is community and that kind of thing, but also being in a town that is really focused on local business has helped. I talked to a lot of other bookstore owners where, either their chamber of commerce shuts them out because they're not like a realtor or a bank, or like their community is like, doesn't go to their street or doesn't read or whatever. And, thankfully here it's a very, it's an affluent community, but a lot of readers. We're 5 miles from about 15 universities, and so that helps a lot too.
What about the book rack are you most proud of?
So our 50th anniversary is coming up in 2025, which I'm the same age as the book rack, so I frequently am like, I can't believe the bookstore's turning 50, but there's also like sort of a personal element there.
Yeah.
But I think when I took over, and my mother had been sick for a little while, the store was in tough shape, and it was a point of pride that I kind of brought it back to success, and that and surviving 2020 are both kind of like, again, I feels against the odds, but maybe it's not, but whatever, like those are both things that I'm pretty pleased about.
Yeah. How do you stay actively involved in the changing times and the community that changes over time as well, and why is that important?
All kidding aside, I'm definitely not the best at that. Like, I do feel like I've missed the boat on a few things. I just joking about turning 50, like I do, I'm like, oh, darn kids. But like I do sometimes, I'm like, there are certain elements of the business that have passed me by, and I'm like working hard to figure out, okay, how do we right the ship? The other key to success is evolving, right? Like, if you stay the same, you're probably in trouble. And so how do you evolve in a way that is organic and satisfying? And, and again, sometimes we do it wrong, but sometimes do it right.
Yeah.
What future do you hope for independent bookstores like the Book Rack?
There's a big issue right now. There's a lot of book bannings and things like that in the news, and I have a lot of bookseller friends who are going through, crazy things like broken windows and, smashed doors and things like that. And like, Scholastic, the publishing company, shipped out some marketing materials recently in a Read with Pride envelope that it said Read with Pride, and the pride was rainbow, and someone had written in Sharpie, "Jesus will save you." Like, it's just so like incongruous. Like, I just can't, and so I just hope that bookstores can exist in a way that they're bringing literature to people safely, and that like we can figure out how to sort of let people with their closed-minded views keep to themselves maybe, and not actually break things and hurt the businesses of others, and that people can feel welcome and open going into bookstores and finding books with characters that they can relate to in whatever way.
Yeah.
I think it's definitely difficult to balance both making everybody happy, but also having the business that you want to run. But do you have any events that promote books and just the store in general, or authors?
So we work with a group that does a quarterly event called the Arlington Author Salon, which is at Kickstand Cafe, a cafe around the corner. And so they do local author readings. We also do school book fairs. So we bring books to the school, and kids buy them and stuff. So we've been doing that for a couple years. And we also just started doing book fairs for grown-ups at breweries.
That's cool.
So this summer we're doing a bunch of those. So those are our main events. But I will say that the elementary school book fairs are fun because kids are just so excited.
Yeah.
They were definitely fun for us.
Right?
Even if you didn't bring money, it was still fun to browse and
Right? It was just a weird, like you walk into the library, it looks all different, and it's just like...
yeah, and they're books solely for kids.
Yeah.
Everything is cool.
And your parents aren't like over your shoulder questioning what you're buying.
Definitely enjoyed this a lot in elementary school.
Yeah.
So could you tell us more about you as a person, like your likes, your dislikes, your family?
So let's see. So I'm married and have a 12-year-old. And we've lived in Arlington for about 20 years. Wow. Well, yeah, about 20 years. Jeez. Anyways, I've always been a reader. And I'm a big music nerd too. My friend, during the pandemic, my friend started running a radio station out of his basement. So I actually DJ a show on that every other week, which is really fun. Cool. Last week, sort of on a whim, my wife and I went to New York to see a band. So we drove Tuesday afternoon, went to the show, and came back Wednesday morning. Which I'm like, ooh, not to hammer that old thing too much, but like, I'm not young like I used to be. But that was really fun. So music's a big part of my life, and if I wasn't doing a bookstore, if I didn't own the bookstore, I'm like, oh, how would I fit music into my life? Those are my big things.
And do you control the music that plays here? Do you have playlists?
So sometimes I do, but
Yeah.
Everyone has equal access to Spotify, and they get to pick whatever they want. So, but I do often make playlists, and but then I'm like, some of the stuff isn't not that I listen to swear-filled rants or anything like that, but just some of it's not really shopping music.
Yeah.
So I don't always, you can't always play exactly what I want.
Yeah.
Although I feel like we should be playing Taylor Swift today.
What little-known book would you like to see make it big?
That's a great question. So let's see. There's a fantasy book called The Belgariad by David Eddings from the 80s, which is one of my personal favorites. And I mean, it's still in print, so it kind of, I feel like it's regarded as sort of a great fantasy novel, so I don't know if it's small enough. But that's one of those ones that whenever kids come in, like, oh, my 13-year-old needs something to read, I'm like, oh, it's got to be this.
What leadership qualities do you value most?
So, I mean, we talked about it a little before, but I mean, for leadership, I think it's being able to identify your own weaknesses.
Yeah.
But, there's a thing that happens here a lot, which is that one of my employees will say, oh, we should do this. I'm like, no, that won't work. And then 6 months later, I'm like, we should do this thing where we do this. They're like, yeah, we should do that. It's a great idea.
Yeah.
And, I do think that in those moments I'm able to be like, oh yeah, you did sense it. I'm hitchhiking off your idea. But I think just, knowing what your weaknesses are and sort of building around that and admitting your weaknesses or whatever.
Yeah.
Definitely.
All right, and our final question is, what book made you fall in love with reading?
When I think about reading nonstop in my teenage years, the two things the David Eddings book I mentioned earlier, The Belgariad, that was one of those ones that I read I vividly remember going to the store. It was before we had new books, so I had to go to Walden Books and buy a new copy of the book that, like, it was like the 5th book in the series, and it was coming out, and I was like so jacked. And the other thing is, there's a series by Piers Anthony, which is also a fantasy series, and for one of my birthdays, I got 2 box sets of volumes 4 through 6 and 7 through 9 or whatever, and so it's just like these 2 box sets with like 6 books brand new just sitting right there, and just it was another one I just like, that was like my afternoons for the next 3 weeks or whatever.
Yeah.
So the Book Rack is an independent bookstore that sells used and new books, and it has a very homey atmosphere to it. So at the Book Rack they sell more than just books. They have trinkets like bookmarks and also mugs and more.
Another gem about the Book Rack is that they sell original versions of books. So let's say in the 70s you read something and you really want to read it again, but you just can't find the book anywhere and you want an original copy. They have a lot at the Book Rack, and you can get this one for like $2. So they're very cheap and very easily accessible. And the database can help you find these books as well. So the Book Rack is also a place where you can give books to, and then they can sell them to people who will read the books. So if you have books from your childhood that you aren't going to read anymore, or you have kids' books that your kids have grown out of, you can give them to the Book Rack, and they will sell them to someone who will love the books just as much as they were loved at your home. So one really amazing thing about the Book Rack is they don't just have books that were recently released, but they have books from my childhood and from the owner's childhood. So no matter what age you are, you can find something that's perfect for you, something that's nostalgic. Like this section behind me includes a lot of books that I loved as a child or that I really wanted to read as a kid, and it's a really good feeling to see them here because I just haven't seen them since I was in elementary school.
So a pet peeve of mine is when I really like the original cover of a new book, but then they release it with the new cover. But at the Book Rack, they have the original covers and the newer covers. So that was the Book Rack. You can visit it at 13 Medford Street in Arlington.
And thank you for pursuing Pages with us.